Hey everyone, welcome back to the Selling with Love podcast. Today's episode is going to be more focused on an aspect we need to do in every sales, whether it's a sales presentation on a one-on-one basis, or perhaps you're doing a sales presentation in front of an audience, or maybe you're going to one of those networking events and you need to introduce yourself, because what's one of the first questions most people ask at these events is, well, what do you do? Like, what's your deal? What's your job? Like, what brings you here? And it's a framework that I had a chance to discover by doing a public speaking training myself. Now, being someone that, speaks from the stage, I'm never someone who's going to omit myself from an opportunity to learn more about public speaking. I've had great trainers. One of the first exposures to the importance of public speaking and quite frankly, my limitations about it was in university business school, where one of the most dreaded classes was public speaking. And you might have heard my stories about how I used to freeze up in front of an audience. And so when I decided that I was going to become a good speaker, then studying and learning tools that allow me to become better at speaking have always been in my back pocket, and I've always been a sponge to absorb the information. Now, one of the things that I've learned with Eric is a framework that's so simple and so fun, we might actually be using it already, yet most of us might not be using it consciously. For those who aren't familiar with Eric Edmeades, who taught me this, he's been the founder of WildFit, and he's been doing some public speaking, the Speaker Academy, Freedom Speaking Academy, great program as well. So we'll make sure there's a link in the show notes so you can learn more about his material. I've lost a lot of weight using his WildFit program as well. And again, the framework was a series of questions we need to answer in every presentation. And you'll see it's a very simple series of questions. They're just one word, although one of them is two words, so careful there. 4 prompts that are questions that the person you're speaking to is more than likely going to be asking themselves. And if you proactively answer it, then you're going to see that it flows the conversation. It gets people to understand context, content, and really what their next steps are going to look like. So, what are those prompts? Well, here we go. Why? What? How? And what if? And so, if you're fans of Simon Sinek, you might have seen that presentation on YouTube talking about start with why. But again, here's where is another example of why we have to start with why. See, before we even introduce what we do or how we do, we have to explain the context, which is like, why are we even sharing this information? So in talks, we always start with answering the why. And an example of this could be even formed in a style of a question. It could be a statement that explains the relevancy of what you're about to say. So an example here is if anybody's asking, well, Jason, what do you do? Well, one of the things I could say is, you know how a lot of people actually are terrified of selling and they're really struggling getting more sales if they're getting started in business? Well, I find a way that actually people can actually learn so much more about how to sell using Selling with Love methodology. So already I've touched on a few of the points, but the first thing that I do is I want to justify and answer the question, why? So by putting that statement forward, it actually automatically gets people to think like, oh, that's probably important. So the why is the first thing that you'll want to answer. So ask yourself, why is it important, whatever it is that you do? If you're doing a sales presentation, the person at the other end of the phone, let's say you're calling or presenting, they're asking, why are you calling me? Why are we having this conversation? Why is this important? And so have a clear answer about that. It should usually speak about the problem. It could talk about the situation, but it is a really interesting dynamic about really just putting context in place as to the frame of the conversation that's happening right now. So answer the why. Everyone's wondering why, so make sure you start your presentations with answering the why. The second question is the what. So what exactly is it that you do with regards to whatever you stated as the why? So in my case, again, I said, you know how a lot of people struggle with regards to getting more sales and having success in their business because they're totally blocked about sales. This is the why. The what is, what do you do about it? How do you solve that? Like, what's the secret here? And I say, well, I do sales trainings and I help people get rid of their blocks around sales using the Selling with Love methodology. So there I explain, what is it that I do? So you might be certified in certain programs, you might be a consultant, you might be doing individual trainings, or you have a service that you offer, but you explain what is it that you do. Answering the what is the next logical step that you want to answer. So what? Let's say you're in health, right? So for example, if you're working in the health industry, maybe you're a personal trainer, you could talk about, let's say, even more specific. I always love going into more niches. My partner, for example, does a lot of mobility and stretching coaching. And when she would go and explain what she does, she could start along the lines of, well, you know how a lot of people talk about how they want to increase their mobility and flexibility to be more healthy and increase their longevity? Well, what I do is do personalized training for help people's mobility and make sure that they get to the level that they want. That is the what, right? So whatever it is for your industry, start thinking, well, what is it that you do? I have one of my clients actually works in a completely different field. They're actually architects and they do environmental certifications for companies. And so in their case, is the why would be along the lines of, well, you know how it's important for us to do things that are necessary to save the environment and build our constructions with higher standards so that we actually take care of every single stakeholder? Well, what I do is actually do reviews of people's construction plans, the way that they build their properties, and ensure that they're at the highest levels of environmental standards, right? We answered the why, we go to the what. And the last part is the how. That's when you can get into a little more of the specifics. Now, you keep this as short or as long, because if the conversation has been interesting and if you've done a good job talking about the why and the what, the how can be the open topic where the person might ask you more questions about, well, how do you do that? And so I'm going to go back to my original example, which is around sales trainings. And for me, again, I've noticed a lot of people have struggles when it comes to selling and getting started in business, and they want to bring in revenues, but sales just seems to be something that blocks them. Well, I offer trainings to get people to get over their blocks around sales with Selling with Love methodology. The how is I do this by offering memberships where people can join, get training, get coached, and be accountable so that they can get the results by being pushed, learning new methods, and making sure that we're in a community that's overcoming these blocks and making sure that we have success and revenue coming into the company. The why, the what, and the how. Those are the first 3 steps, and we answer all these questions. Again, if I'm using a health example around stretch and mobility, you would start saying, we schedule 60 minutes and we do assessments and we look at where your current levels are, and then I'll have you do a series of exercise while we're together, and I'll assist you in every single posture to make sure that you have the maximum mobility, and we create improvements over the month that we work together. Now you're really going into the framework of how you deliver your product and service. If I use the engineering environmental assessment example again, you would start lining out saying, first we would meet, we discuss your project, we would put together a proposal, we'd look at all the different certifications that exist and make sure that we find the ones that match your budget and your requirements to make sure we both have a success in the process. Why, what, how? That is the order, that is how we do it. Which brings us to the last one, which is the what if. Now, very interestingly, the what if in a sales context happens to be the objections. You can actually address them ahead of time. And so if somebody's doing, in my case, sales training, the what if could be around the lines of, if somebody doesn't have any experience in sales or really has struggle around sales, we really work with them, and we can even give them transformational experiences, given that our training is actually designed for people that don't consider themselves salespeople. In the case of mobility, you could say, if you've never been able to touch your toes and you've always been a bit ashamed with your level of mobility, that's actually a great place to start. And there's always a massive improvement for people that start from that place. And again, for the environmental assessment and engineering side, it would be more along the lines of saying, like, even if you think that it's going to be much more expensive for you to do environmental certifications, you'll realize there's important places we can save money, and you might realize it's not as expensive as you thought. The what if gets built over time, and if you have a structured answer to all of the what ifs, you actually are able to handle the objections ahead of time. And the what if, again, while you're opening with the why and the what if might be the series of questions that come from the person after you've made a great introduction. And so that is the framework. It's not that complicated, but it is absolutely beautiful. If you're part of the Selling with Love community on Facebook, I'd love to hear your message. Whether you want to type it out or you want to create a video in the community, I will personally review it, give you feedback, and ensure that you have a tight elevator presentation for your why, your what, your how, and your what if. As for those of you who are members, who are paying members within the Selling with Love membership, well, we're working together. We're going to craft our message together, and we're going to build a solid presentation. And if you're just a listener to the podcast, well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Know that joining the community on Facebook is absolutely free, and we'll make a link in the show notes so you can come and join us there. And when you craft that presentation and you follow this framework, you're going to come across as someone who is very interesting because you've prepared to keep their interest by going through the why, the what, the how, and the what if. As always, enjoy and keep selling with love.